I'm Chris Morris, founder of the Morrissey Model, and this is my call to the educational community. Say no more to standardized tests. There's a direct quote from Albert Einstein that I'd like to read to start this segment. He says, "I believe in standardized automobiles. I do not believe in standardizing human beings. Standardization is a great peril which threatens American culture." Guys, I don't want standardized human beings. We are supposed to be different, and we're supposed to have different strengths and weaknesses. I don't want everyone to be good at what I'm good at. I want people who are really good at fixing cars to be able to fix my car. I want people who are creative to be able to add value to my life. And in that way, we all have a better future for ourselves. Standardized testing is an absolute assault on creativity and coming up with original thought and original ideas that lead to true value. I wanted to give you this analogy to help people understand what's currently going on in our nation when it pertains to standardized tests and its effects on people in the classroom, whether they be students or teachers. I once heard someone say a test is simply a tool, and a tool is very useful for measuring results. However, tools don't measure all things and provide accurate results. And I'd like to give you this analogy. So think of a standardized test like, say, this ruler. This ruler measures results. It has a purpose, but you'd be a fool to think that this ruler actually measured all things the same. For example, let's say I had this standard kiwi, found it in my kitchen. I wanted to measure the circumference of this kiwi using this tool, a ruler. And while it does show me the number of inches, it's not the right shape, it's not very pliable, and it can't give me the circumference of what I'm trying to find out. It's not the right tool for this given situation. You'd be a fool to say, hey, look at the temperature outside. It looks like a hot one. Could you tell me how hot it is? What's the temperature going to be? And I pull out a ruler and expect to measure accurate results based off of the number of inches on my ruler. I don't really think so. What if I were to come up to somebody, or maybe come up to a car that weighed 2,000 pounds, and somebody wanted to say, hey, could you tell me how much this car weighs? And I pulled out a ruler and expected to get accurate results. Guys, this is the exact same thing that we're expecting to get out of some of these standardized tests that are in our schools and trying to measure what goes on throughout a given school year. I was a math teacher for 7, maybe 8 years straight. And during my time, it was just one big confusing mess when it came to connecting what we actually do and what goes on in the teaching of the classroom and that standardized test that we had at the end of the year. They were measuring two different things, not much unlike when I have a ruler and I'm trying to give the circumference of something as simple as a kiwi. I'll give you an example. When we were coming up through grad school and entering the classroom with this cohort I was a part of, it wasn't long that they were really stressing to us that we had to teach kind of starting from the end and working our way forward, working our way backward in a sense. So what I mean by that is, rather than be given a list of standards, let's say there was, 200 standards that we had to cover throughout the course of a year, we weren't given the freedom to just directly teach each unit. We couldn't learn about slope and y-intercept, and then learn about quadratics, and then later get into trigonometry and learn about sine and cosine and directly teach that way. They stressed to us, in fact, we would get in trouble if we didn't. They would say, no, what you do is you give this all-encompassing large word problem that encompasses all these skills that they'll have to figure out throughout the course of a year. And what we're going to do is we're going to give them this problem and have discussion, free talk with our students, and see if they can kind of organically come up with a lot of these specific formulas and a lot of these particular ways that we already know exist in algebra, and hope that they're able to learn all these standards through learning how to solve a real problem. It sounds well and good in theory, but in reality, it's a slow, arduous process. You can't do teaching that way without expecting to go very slowly but go very deep at the same time. You can't cover multiple standards, perhaps 200 standards throughout the course of a year, and go that slowly as you teach along. The problem was the test that they gave us at the end of that year was more like this ruler. They wanted to see if the kid knew slope and y-intercept. They wanted to know that the kid knew quadratics. They wanted to know if the kid knew trigonometry. Very detailed standards that if you didn't mention those processes along the way, you couldn't get full credit or much credit at all. However, I had many kids who had learned with this process. They were given a problem and in some instances actually came up with their own unique, innovative way to solve the question. They were able to justify their thinking, and it actually made sense to me as their teacher. And I had to admit, even though that wasn't the way of answering it that I wanted, they actually had solved it with their own unique problem-solving skills, which is what we actually want. Unfortunately, at the end of the year, we were given this measuring tool to figure out how Johnny had solved this unique problem by his own devices. Even though he got the right answer, and in my book should have had full credit, he actually only got about 1 point when it was a 5-point question. And it happened over and over and over. It was unjust, it was unfair, and it wasn't his fault. He thinks he's less intelligent than he actually is. I feel like I'm less impactful as a teacher than I actually am because of this faulty measuring device that's currently being used and wrapping itself, calling it standardized testing. This is not a fault on our students or teachers. This is a fault of what we're using as a measuring tool to figure out where we stand. It has to change, and I'm here to talk about it. Guys, standardized testing has got to go, and where it's not going to go until we actually start voicing our concerns. I know many of you teachers right now are fed up with the testing. There are some reports that kids ages, grades 3 through 8, I believe it is, have 10 to 20 standardized tests in a given school year. That's not including test prep, which sometimes for multiple weeks, for each test, you might have a week and a half of just test prep to get kids ready for these standardized tests that are so high stakes. They're a burden on our teachers and students and a yoke around the necks. We're taking them away from actually learning and self-discovery and giving them the proper time to actually have understanding, because there's so much pressure on this test that doesn't necessarily actually assess the learning that took place throughout the year. It's got to change. Standardized testing has got to go, and it's not going to leave unless you make your voices known. Call Capitol Hill. Call the school board. I don't know who you have to reach out to. Call the state. But we got to start speaking up and say we want change. I recently read an article about some Georgia schools. There was about 22 who already are trying to petition to get rid of state testing in their state and doing their own, school-based testing assessments that they come up with for their individual student bodies. There is hope that this can change. Don't believe the lie that it can't. But it's not going to change if we keep taking it and keep taking it and keep going along and staying with the status quo. Guys, no more standardized testing. This is a message from me, Chris Morris. I hope you have a good day and you have something to think about, because things have to change.